Welcome to the all-new Marketpath video release notes, where we talk about new features, bug fixes, and other updates that have taken place within Marketpath CMS. I am Matt Zintz, founder and CEO. To our right, we have, your left probably, we have Michael Wessel. He's one of our senior developers. To our left, your right maybe, we have Levi Carter, who's our senior product developer. And today we're going to talk about the current release, which is Marketpath CMS release version 1.2.0. This is actually a phase 2 of 6 different phases for our new feature that we plan to implement by the end of the year, first of the new year, called the Package Manager. And the Package Manager has, as I mentioned, 6 different phases. We're in phase 2, and this is sort of a prerequisites phase. The next phase is authoring, being able to build packages, and I'm not going to explain what the Package Manager is in this just yet anyway. Site installation, and then the 5th phase is the release, and then after that we have another release for additional advanced features. If you one of the 3 people following our release notes after each release, one of the 3 people that actually read it, you might notice that we have a llama theme. You can thank Levi for helping to start the llama theme. Every release has a different llama name associated with it. We've been doing this for the last 4 years, except for these releases. These are the only ones that don't have a llama associated with them.
Yet.
So, yeah, that's true. We did add an additional release. We snuck it in here, and that one does have a llama name, and that's called Operation Trigger Llama, because it has to do with marketing automation. Okay, so we're going to get into the layman's benefits of this release. This is just a high level for marketers and editors, people who are non-technical, so that you don't have to listen to us go on and on about how cool it is to refactor the code base behind the scenes. Okay, so the biggest update that we have here is data validation at all levels. And it's kind of hard to explain, but this basically means in the current system, what's deployed currently, everything is validated within the browser, essentially. This doesn't mean insecure. Everything is secure. Don't worry about that. It just means that what gets sent back to the servers isn't 100% validated. Because we built it, we kind of know what to expect. But we do plan to release our API coming up here in the next 6 months. I don't know, 4 to 6 months time frame. And if we're going to give other people access to use our API for additional automation type activities, we have to validate every single bit of content and data coming in. So this was a huge effort. It affects every level of the system, including the UI and the service layer, API, and even the database. And another big section was imports and exports. So that was a big, big piece. And so this is going to give us the improved REST API that we need to be able to open it up for others to create new worlds or new things that we haven't even thought about. Another big piece of this release is front-end testing. So we actually run simulated tests on all these different browsers, different devices, and it walks through and clicks different areas, and it expects certain responses. So there's a lot that happens there. That uses a system called Selenium, which is pretty popular front-end testing system. A couple other little features. We have allow the same domain names on multiple sites. So if you have a site in Marketpath CMS already, and you're rebuilding that site, which we're at the point now where we're rebuilding sites, which is interesting in and of itself that we're at that point already. But then you have the capability to use that same domain on another site, and when you're ready to switch it, you just more or less click a button and they take over. One takes over for the other. It's pretty slick. Last high level quick update is layman's benefits, or I'm sorry, is the in the layman's benefits is the automation capabilities, and that is when a form gets submitted, you can send it out and do things with it. And the system that we integrated with is Zapier. So it integrates with 1,500 other services through their APIs, and so you can create what they call zaps. So when somebody submits a form in Marketpath CMS, you can send it out to your email marketing provider, you can send it out to Salesforce or some other CRM provider, You can do all sorts of different cool things with it. 1,500 different apps, like I said, integrate with it. So there's a lot that you can do with it. That gave us the most bang for the buck for this effort. So that's the real high level. We don't have a ton of bug fixes. The system has been in a pretty stable release. I know we've had a couple small ones here and there that we've implemented, and we'll have to go back and look at those, but I don't even think they're really worth mentioning. All right. So now, for all you listeners that aren't tech savvy, well, I shouldn't say tech savvy. That's not fair either, is it? We should say very technical in nature. You want to hear the nitty gritty. We're going to talk about these from a different standpoint and what was involved, which means that I get to shut up a little bit and let these guys talk. So, do you have a high-level explanation of what the package manager is, or do you want me to do that?
No, that's perfectly fine. At a high level, what the package manager is it enables developers primarily to be able to bundle different objects together, like their templates, JavaScript, style sheets. Those would be the biggest ones, but you could even include articles, blogs. You could include data stores and data store items together. But it essentially enables you to create what we call a package out of those objects. And that makes it easy for somebody to use those same objects on a different site. It's a little bit more complicated than that because you actually allow it will allow for mapping of different objects from the old site to the new site, and this gets into the custom fields and gets really hairy.
But what are some examples of this though? Like,
perfect. So some examples would be like you create a widget on your homepage that maybe has a certain slideshow and a certain presentation of. You want to be able to pull in articles and display like the image and the name and use certain CSS or JavaScript. So you could actually create, bundle all that together into a package, make that available, and somebody else on some other site could then pull that in, or maybe you pull that into your own sites on other places.
So
if you need to edit that at any point in time, you can edit it on the original site, update your package, and pull that in everywhere that's used. So as browsers change and maybe new capabilities evolve or old capabilities are sort of change and things that were valid are no longer. Any front-end developer experiences this all the time.
So you mentioned two sides to this, right? You public and a private side. So you can build a package, whether it's a widget, some type of image gallery widget, or whether it's a foundational base for all of your sites, or whether it is some other fancy...
if you want to build a payment form, for example, and reuse a payment form in multiple places.
Yeah, so it's basically reusing code. So you're saying that you can build a form, build a package and either keep it private so that you can only use it for all of the sites that you develop, or you can make that public and that submits it to the public repository.
Right.
So we're going to talk about the package manager first. So why did we have to do the refactor?
Well, there's a variety of reasons. One that you mentioned was opening up the API. Now, previously we did do some validation of our data. Just to reiterate that, it's not that we were previously secure and now we're secure, but especially with our unstructured data, that would be things like our custom fields and data stores. We would pass in from the UI a JSON object, basically raw data. Is formatted as a string, which if you were interacting directly with the API instead of going through our interface first, you could hypothetically pass in anything you wanted to before. It wouldn't break the system. You couldn't hack it. It was still secure, as mentioned, but you could pass in something totally invalid, and your app would stop working, and everything would just suddenly crawl to a halt, and you may or may not know why. So adding this custom field serialization, deserialization, validation, all of that stuff to a much more detailed level allows us to ensure that anything that gets passed into the API, whether or not that's valid in terms of its structure, and also in terms of the data. So you can't, for instance, try and reference something on another site. It'll say, hey, that's not on this site. You've got to submit your object again, which provides a better feedback, better interface in a lot of cases. as well as that additional layer of protection, security,
Yeah.
and so that's really important. And then where that gets into package manager is in the way, and this is getting into some technical details a little bit, so I'll try to abstract a little, but our package manager is essentially going to be able to take information from one site, store it in a temporary state, and then move that to another site and copy it to another site, and then translate essentially all of the various objects from one site to the other, which it can't really do if everything's just loose JSON. It's much more effective to be able to use some kind of a hard data library to be able to map like this object type and this reference from this old site now becomes this same object type but a different reference on the new site. And having that library enables us. That's why it's a prerequisite to be able to do that, and clears the path for some much more sophisticated and effective methods of moving data and of referencing things. And then once again, of course, being able to validate that and know that everything that's referenced from this, what in the back end may look like just a raw JSON object, but to actually know that everything in that object is on the correct site and is in perhaps the import or already on the site. So a lot of technical background potentially helpful for that. But in essence, this just clears the way for us to do a lot of really cool stuff with your data and make it easier for you to do cool stuff with your data while keeping everything safe, secure, and in the correct format.
Yeah. The other thing that I mentioned was, or that I wanted to mention was when you're talking about the update. So you update the original package with the new version. There are different types of updates available to that.
Absolutely. Yep. So one option would be to, and a lot of this has to do with when that package is installed on all of the different sites. So when you install a package on a site, you should be able to choose whether you want it to be able to be automatically updated when that package is updated, or if you want it to ask you, because some updates might break your site, and some you might trust yourself because you know that you're the author of that package and you're not going to update it unless it's going to work on all these sites. So there's use cases for both, but essentially enable it so that you update it once and it updates everywhere automatically, for especially for your own purposes internally. So in this example of a homepage widget, you update your JavaScript, add some new capability or something. It's available almost instantly on every site that you've installed this package on, which includes that homepage widget.
There's some really nice management capability right there. All right, let's jump over to Michael for a second. Let's talk about Selenium testing. Give us a quick overview of what that involves from a development standpoint to get that to happen. I said quick, right?
Quick, yeah. The short explanation that I can come up with is that we created the option to test multiple browsers, multiple browser versions, using both our local copies of the browsers running on our local machines, as well as we integrated with the Browser Stack API in a way that allows us to leverage their system as well to test browsers, multiple browsers, to ensure that all of our core functionality, anytime we push out a new release or add some new code, new functionality,
especially a release this big that affects everything,
something like this allows us to verify that in pushing this code, we don't inadvertently break core functionality on forms, for example, or a data store. If one of the save button no longer works, we need to know that before we release this code, because the system is so large, it's really difficult to realize when you make one tiny change in this library over here, the widespread ramifications. So this is basically our effort to have a consistent platform for running our testing against that should hit most of the browsers, most of the core browsers, so that we're not going to cause havoc out in production world.
So that's a big plus, and that's actually kind of fun to watch. It'd be neat to do just a small snippet of that and show how that works on the screen, how it just walks through it. And it does hundreds of tests, some simultaneously. I think you made it. Is it simultaneous?
It will do with Firefox. It runs a little slower, but with Chrome it runs pretty quickly.
The superior browser.
The superior browser.
Ongoing debate. It depends on the day too, because one's better than the other. I think every other day it seems like. All right, so another big piece of this is the bane of Levi's existence over the last month, the import and export engine. But the good thing is that this is very, very closely tied to the package manager eventual functionality that we're working towards building. So you've knocked, even though this is a long sprint, you've knocked a lot of that out by rebuilding our import-export engine, which essentially is similar to the package manager because you can create exports. You just can't have them automatically update by clicking a button on a site. So you have to roll those in manually on each site. But that's been quite an effort. Some of the challenges that you've had with that, what are those?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges with import-export is the mapping of references. So in our system, we have our own identifiers for every object in the database. But when you export that, you don't necessarily want to get a whole bunch of these identifiers because that doesn't mean anything. If you have a list of authors, you want to see all the author names because that's what means something to a human. Then when you import that, you want to be able to import it with all of those author names mapped on the, maybe a different site or it may be the same site. So you've got to have some way of identifying, well, does this object exist on the site that you're importing it to? If it does it need to be updated and all of this? There's some
and even so, if it has the same name, that doesn't mean it's the same object.
Right. You may import 3 articles, and each article has the same name, but that's valid because, hey, articles can share the same name. You might import 3 different calendar entries, and you've got the same calendar entry, every week for a month because you've got some event happening, and it happens every week for a month. And so you've got to be able to tell, well, do I need to update an existing object? Do I need to create a new one? And how do I map that both in the exports and even more complicated in the imports and keep everything valid? So one of the changes with this in this release is previously our imports basically just imported. They did some basic validation, but there wasn't a whole lot of the more advanced validation that happened. With this release now, we're able to take that and all of your custom fields and everything. It won't allow you to save objects as a part of the import unless that import is valid. So if you have a custom field, just a true false, a checkbox, say that it has to be checked in order for it to be valid because that's what you as a template developer has decided, it won't import it unless that field is set in the import. So a lot of much more advanced validation happening in imports as well, and that mapping also very complicated in the
well, and that's the cool part of it too, is that, and this is where it shares the foundation with the new package manager that's coming, is you take the import itself, and here's the eventual site that it's going on, but you push that in that temporary space or the tables really where they go. So you push the import into the temporary tables, validate everything, and so nothing gets moved over to the final site. Whereas in the old system, we bypassed that middle and we just started copying stuff over to the site. And if it failed, sorry, some stuff may have been updated, some stuff may not have been. And here's the error why, if it was very descriptive. Now we have at least some descriptive error. What caused the problem? What object is doing the bad things to your import?
Yep.
So,
and in the near future, probably not in this release, you'll actually be able to edit it in that intermediate space. Which is pretty cool. To be able to do, like, you run an import and you can tell it's not going to work if I import it right now because this field and this field are missing. So you could actually be able to edit it in that temporary space directly with all of the validation and the mapping and everything that has to take place, and update it instead of having to update it in the file itself. You could update it in that temporary space and then commit the import. And one more note on the imports and exports, and something that you'll see as a difference a little bit if you've done a lot of imports and exports between the previous version of the CMS and the new version of Marketpath CMS, is that imports and exports have been a little bit simplified. Previously, you'll know if you tried to create an export and then an import off of that export, there were just a lot of options, and the vast majority of those options weren't really being used, especially some mapping options and default values and a lot of just somewhat advanced functionality, but it was an over-engineered solution. So with this, it's still a highly engineered solution, but it's engineered in a different way where we've been able to simplify some of those options, particularly remove some of the options that just aren't used, and hopefully make the whole experience a little bit easier, better, faster, more robust, and simpler for somebody without a lot of technical knowledge about what all these different options means to be able to use.
Yeah. Last topic here is the Operation Trigger that we talked about, meaning triggering marketing automation, which puts us in, gives us some great capabilities from that standpoint. This is, like I mentioned earlier, was integrated with Zapier. Zapier integrating with 15 other apps, now Marketpath CMS, or as soon as we release it anyway.
15,000.
1,500.
Oh, 100. 1,500.
100, yeah. 100. Zeros are important, Levi. So we mentioned the updated REST API, and I'm going to let you kind of finish us off, talk about the Zapier integration a little bit and what that journey sort of looked like for you.
Essentially, it was a little bit of a headache trying to wrap myself or understand how the process worked end to end, but they do have a fair amount of documentation, a fair amount of developer documentation and experience out there that I was able to leverage. But I mean, essentially, this is a way that we can leverage a lot of other functionality that's been written by a bunch of other developers with this platform, and using our code, for publishes or anytime we have somebody submits a form, being able to use real data and push that out to other systems. Primarily, if you have a contact form on your site and you want to add some data to Salesforce, for example, with this new automation functionality, we have the ability to, when someone submits that form, we can send a notification to Zapier, and then you would configure that whenever you receive this notification, it goes into Salesforce with whatever fields that are available via that particular application, whether it's the lead campaign, however that's configured, or if you want to have, for example, if you are integrated with Slack for some reason, if you want to have a Slack notification sent to you anytime somebody sends that, or...
Well, that'd be nice for form submission, so
Yes,
especially from a sales team. I mean, it's nice sending it to Salesforce, but that would be great. Send off an email to the sales team and send, like, if it's some type of conversion form or lead generation form on your website, you can send it off the sales team email, you can send it to Slack, you can send it to all these other places and get immediate notification so that they're on top of it and immediately following up, because that's a warm lead right there. You want to get somebody as soon as they submit that form. You don't want to be creepy about it, but you do want to get back in touch with them if that's the type of lead form that it is.
And the nice thing is you are able to leverage whatever that other application is capable of doing. So if you wanted to use some advanced Gmail functionality that extend beyond what our core form submission emails will do, you can have the option where, if the specific field is equal to, if they signed up for the new products newsletter,
Or if it's a region.
or
Like
if
from a sales
something,
standpoint.
you can process that data coming in utilizing another application's.
If it's from this state, then send it to this person. If it's from this state, send it over here. I mean,
And so
there's all sorts of
you
things.
can do some advanced functionality that you can configure, using other people's code, leveraging other people's code to get what you need done.
And that's the whole point of Zapier. And there's some other systems out there that eventually that we'll integrate with as well. Our integration on the back end Marketpath CMS management side, however, is pretty limited. You can create an API key that gets set up with Zapier itself, and you can see the log of events that are taking place. But that's about all you can do on the back end of Marketpath CMS. Currently. Eventually, we have in our feature pipeline to build that out into its own automated event management system, with triggers and actions on our side. We're not trying to recreate Zapier by any means, but we're trying to connect out to other systems that allow us some improved integration opportunities.
If we find another application similar to the Zapier that has 2,000 applications available to them, that would be an opportunity where we can expand that functionality to go there, and we can also look at executing other events within CMS itself.
MuleSoft.
Yeah, MuleSoft
that's
is another
one.
thing. And then looking into calling, if we have a form submission, create a new data store item or something along those types.
And that would be really, really exciting down that road. The two things, the two events that we are capturing right now are form submissions. So they're pretty important from a lead generation inbound marketing standpoint. Also, publishing. So you can trigger types of publishes. Every time this blog has a blog post published, or every time a blog post is published, or every time a calendar entry is published, then perform whatever magic you want on it. Send it here and here. First of all, we're trying to make it so we get the most bang for the buck by integrating with a system like Zapier, but also when we start building it out in our new system, marketing automation can be really hard and really expensive. So we are really trying to simplify that and make it so much easier for the end user, the marketer, who may not be a technical individual, to be able to just go in and start setting up triggers and actions based on those triggers. So that's our goal. We are several big steps towards that goal, and I think the Zapier integration really affords us a lot of capability. So that's pretty exciting. So good work on that. I don't think I have anything else. Anything else you want to talk about for this release?
I'd just say the biggest thing with this release is the most exciting thing is how it sets us up for future releases, future development. We're really putting ourselves in a very pretty place for doing some more advanced automation, for doing some really nice, the package manager features, and even other, things on a roadmap that are not really solid yet, so we can't talk about it at the moment. But I'm pretty excited about some possibilities.
I thought you were going to. Can't talk about it, but we
can't
will
talk about
right
it
here.
until we commit. But things like really going above and beyond to customize the shapes of different objects and adding more interplay in between different pieces. So a lot of really cool functionality that sets us up for speed improvements even on the live side and just some pretty cool stuff. So I think that's the biggest thing about this whole thing, and the triggering and automation pieces and this validation is we're really ready to take off in some pretty exciting new directions. That everybody in the CMS currently is going to get to take advantage of, and it's going to be pretty sweet.
Yep, absolutely. And so the one thing is that there aren't a lot of UI changes, as we mentioned before, but that doesn't mean that a lot of work hasn't been done to the system. So, well, this is pretty long, probably longer than we want. We'll see if we can edit it down a little bit. But if you've gotten this far and you've listened to us, I'm going to cut all of Michael's comments out. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to just go right here over.
I'm too pretty. I'm too pretty for this.
You are too pretty for this video cast. What is it? I don't even know what the proper name is. Video cast? Video? Just video. I think that's what it works. Anyway, thank you from all of us here at Marketpath for taking the time to watch this Marketpath video release notes. Until next time.